The morning light shone through the blinds, painting stripes on the worn parquet of my bedroom. I lay still, listening to the ticking of the clock and the creaking of the old house. At 78, you begin to appreciate these sounds. They remind you that you're still here, even when there's no one left around. Elaine passed away 3 years ago. Pancreatic cancer is relentless and swift. 52 years together, and suddenly there's an emptiness. Her pillow still rests next to mine. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and reach out to touch her shoulder, but my fingers find only cold fabric. I struggle to get out of bed, feeling a familiar ache in my joints. The doctors say it's arthritis. I call it age. I put on my glasses and wandered into the kitchen where I'd long ago established a ritual: coffee, peanut butter toast, and the newspaper. Simple pleasures that no one can take away. My house in Fall River isn't the kind of house you see on the covers of magazines. It's 2 stories high with a small garden I can no longer properly cultivate. But it's ours, mine and Elaine's. We bought it 40 years ago when I got a promotion in an accounting firm. Paid off the mortgage in 15 years, saving for everything. I've always been careful with money. Not stingy, just rational. Elaine used to laugh when she called me an accountant to the core, but it was that caution that allowed us to live decently and secure a future for our daughter Hazel. Hazel. I felt a bitterness in my mouth at the thought of her. An only child, our pride and joy. Once upon a time. Now she's 46, working as a logistics coordinator for Bay State Shipping. Comes once a month to check on the old man with her husband Cordell. Today was the day. I checked the calendar on the refrigerator, even though I already knew the date. Every 3rd Saturday of the month, 11 to 1 o'clock in the afternoon, just like the schedule. I rubbed my temple, anticipating a headache. These visits always left an unpleasant residue. The doorbell rang at 11 sharp. Hazel was always on time, the only thing left of my upbringing. "Daddy!" she exclaimed, hugging me like she really missed me. "Have you lost weight? Are you eating well?" Her hair, once brown like Elaine's, was now dyed a lighter shade and styled in an expensive style. Too much makeup for a Saturday morning. Too much perfume. "Hello, Hazel," I pulled away, looking over her shoulder at Cordell, who was stomping awkwardly on the doorstep. Cordell Woodworth, my son-in-law for 20 years. Tall, with bald spots he carefully disguised by slicking his thinning hair to the side. An insurance appraiser for Providence Insurance. Always in a suit, always with that strained smile. "Aubrey," he nodded, shaking my hand. "Great day, isn't it?" I escorted them into the living room, where I'd already made tea and cookies. Hazel started fussing at once, rearranging the cups and adjusting the napkins. "Daddy, why don't you let me hire a cleaning lady? You shouldn't have to work so hard at your age." "I'm doing just fine on my own," I replied, sitting down in my chair. "Movement is life." "But you could move in with us," she continued, not looking me in the eye. "We have a guest room, remember? You wouldn't have to do anything." We went through this conversation every month. Hazel insisted. I refused. But today, Cordell was unusually proactive about it. "Seriously, Aubrey," he said, taking a bite of his cookie. "Think about it. A big house for one person is overkill. It could be sold." "And what would happen to the money?" I asked bluntly. Cordell choked. "Well, obviously, it would be yours." He laughed a little too loudly. "We're just concerned for your welfare." Hazel threw him an annoyed look. "Dad, we really are concerned. After Mom's gone, you've become so withdrawn." I put the cup on the table. "Shut down? I've always been that way, Hazel, and your mother understood that." The conversation turned, as usual, to news and gossip. Hazel talked about work, her colleagues, vacation plans. Cordell was more silent, occasionally glancing at his watch. Then, suddenly, he changed the subject. "By the way, Aubrey," he began casually, "I read an article recently about how scammers are targeting the elderly. It's horrible. You keep your money in a safe place, don't you?" I looked at him carefully. It's pretty safe. Banks are offering great deals for seniors now, he continued. What bank do you have an account with? Maybe I could recommend something better. Fall River Community Bank, I replied, watching his reaction. I've been a customer for 30 years. Oh, not a bad choice, he nodded. But their interest rates aren't the highest. Have you ever thought about transferring to a larger bank? Or maybe investing? I know some great funds. Cordell, Hazel interrupted him with a strained smile. Daddy's too conservative for that sort of thing. Aren't you, Daddy? I nodded. I prefer to keep my money where I can see and touch it. Cash? Cordell stepped forward, a strange gleam in his eyes. But it's so insecure. Not just cash, I answered, deliberately vague. I have a deposit account, I have bonds, and yes, some cash in the bank safe. Old habit. I noticed them exchange a glance. A quick, barely noticeable exchange of glances, but I've spent a lifetime analyzing financial documents and noticing inconsistencies. People aren't any harder to read. And what safe deposit box do you keep the cash in? Cordell asked with feigned indifference. The same one, I answered. At Fall River Community. Hazel stood up abruptly. Let me do the dishes, Daddy, and then we could go to the store. Do you need groceries? We never went to the store during their visits. Never. It was a new suggestion and it was unsettling. No, thanks, I replied. I order delivery from Walmart once a week. It's very convenient. But fresh produce, Dad. Vegetables, fruit. She was almost begging. Maybe next time, I cut her off. After that, the visit quickly came to an end. Hazel hugged me fussily. Cordell shook my hand more firmly than usual. They left, promising to return in a month, maybe sooner, to check on you. I watched their silver Lexus pull out of the driveway, a car they couldn't afford with their income. I always suspected Cordell was up to his eyeballs in debt. Elaine said I was too critical of him, but Elaine always looked for the best in people. I looked for inconsistencies. That night I sat in my office looking at an old photograph of Elaine. It was taken in Cape Cod, her hair waving in the wind and a smile lighting up her face. That's how I remembered her. Alive, laughing, real. Something's going on, Ellie, I whispered to the pictures. And I don't like it. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out a file folder. My finances were in perfect order right down to the last dime. Bank statements, tax returns, investment portfolios. I flipped through them, making sure everything was in place. Strange that Cordell was so interested in my safety deposit box. Even stranger that I'd mentioned it. Maybe age is taking its toll, and I'm becoming less cautious. Or maybe subconsciously I wanted to test their reaction. Either way, I needed to be doubly vigilant now. I pulled out my phone and made a note on my calendar to visit the bank on Monday to check the contents of the safe deposit box, just in case. Dusk was falling outside the window. The house was filling with shadows and memories of better times. I closed the folder and put it back where it belonged. If Elaine were alive, she'd say I was paranoid, that our daughter would never do anything wrong. But Elaine's gone, and I've always believed in numbers and facts more than people. And the facts said something was wrong. I could feel it as clearly as the pain in my joints before it rained. I turned off the light and went upstairs to the bedroom. I put my glasses on the bedside table next to Elaine's picture. Lay down on my half of the bed, leaving her half untouched as always. Good night, Ellie, I whispered into the darkness. At times like this, I almost believed she could hear me. Monday was rainy. I watched the drops drumming on the garage roof from the kitchen window and thought about Hazel and Cordell's strange behavior during their last visit. Something about their inquiries about my finances kept me on edge. Taking a sip of coffee, I glanced at the clock 9 in the morning, another hour before the bank opened. Going to Fall River Community Bank in the morning had been my weekly ritual for the past 20 years. Every Monday I'd go through my accounts, check my investments, sometimes withdraw a small amount of cash for current expenses. People of my generation don't trust plastic cards the way young people do. The phone rang. I picked it up, expecting to hear another telemarketer. Dad? Hazel's voice sounded unnaturally cheerful. How are you today? I'm fine, I answered, surprised by her call. Usually after visits, she didn't show up for at least a week. Did something happen? No, I just wanted to make sure you were okay. Cordell and I have been worried about you, especially since Saturday. You seemed, distracted. I'm perfectly fine, I cut him off. Going to the bank as usual. There was a pause. The bank? Today? There was something akin to alarm in her voice. But it's raining outside, Daddy. Why don't you put it off till tomorrow? Rain's no problem, I looked out the window. Besides, I have an umbrella. All right, she agreed reluctantly. Be careful. And Dad, you'll let me know if you need anything, right? Any help? Sure, I lied. After talking to Hazel, the strange feeling of unease only grew stronger. Why did she suddenly care if I went to the bank? I pulled an old raincoat and a tattered umbrella out of the closet. Before I left, I checked my home safe, hidden behind a painting in the study. Everything was there. Passport, birth certificate, house deed, will. The bank was a 15-minute walk from my house. Despite the rain, I preferred to walk. Dr. Shapiro, my therapist, constantly reminded me of the importance of physical activity at my age. At the bank, I was greeted by Doris, a teller who had worked here seemingly longer than I had. Her hair, once red, was now completely gray, but her smile was still as warm. Mr. Bayless, as usual, accurate as clockwork, she greeted me. Hello, Doris. How are your grandchildren? We exchanged the usual pleasantries before I got down to business. I checked my accounts. Everything was in order. Then I asked for access to my safety deposit box. Of course, Doris nodded. Thomas will show you out. Thomas, a young bank employee whom I was seeing for the first time, took me to the vault. I opened my box and was relieved to see that all the contents were there. The bonds, a small amount of cash, Elaine's family jewelry, which I'd kept for Hazel, though she didn't know about it. Returning home, I felt I was being watched. Turning around, I noticed a silver Lexus, very similar to Cordell's car, parked across the street from the bank. As I glanced in its direction, the car started up and disappeared around the corner. At home, the first thing I did was check my office. Something seemed off, though I couldn't tell exactly what it was. The papers on the desk were laid out as I'd left them, but I had the feeling that someone had been looking through them. I began to methodically examine every shelf, every drawer. In the bottom drawer of the desk, I kept a folder of real estate documents. It looked untouched, but when I opened it, I noticed that several pages had been turned. I'd always been pedantic about such things, and I remembered exactly how I'd left those documents. A chill ran down my spine. Someone had been in my house, in my office, going through my things, and it could only be Hazel and Cordell. No one else had keys. I pulled out my phone and called the security installation company. The next day, they installed cameras and motion sensors. The technician, a young guy with tattoos on his arms, looked at me strangely when I insisted on installing a camera pointed at my office. Are you expecting thieves, Mr. Bayless? Not thieves, I replied. A family. He nodded understandingly, asking no further questions. The next morning, the letter carrier brought a letter from the bank. I opened it, expecting to see the usual statement, but instead I found a notice of a request for a duplicate key to my safe deposit box. The letter said the request had been made on October 3rd, 3 days ago, but the bank's rules required them to notify the primary owner before issuing a duplicate. My hands trembled as I reread the letter a second time. I had never requested a duplicate key. Never. I immediately called the bank and asked to be put through to the manager, Mr. Foster. Mr. Bayless, what can I do for you? His voice sounded concerned. I received a notice of a request for a duplicate key to my safe deposit box, I said. I've never made such a request. Pause. One moment, let me check. I could hear him typing something on the keyboard. Yes, the request was logged on October 3rd. It's standard procedure when a key is lost. Are you sure you didn't make that request? Absolutely sure. My voice sounded firmer than I expected. I want this request canceled immediately, and I demand to know who initiated it. Of course, Mr. Bayless. We'll conduct an internal investigation. Do you also want to change the access code to your safe deposit box? Yes, and I want access to my accounts restricted. No transactions without my personal presence at the bank. After my conversation with Mr. Foster, I sat at the window, watching the street and thinking. A plan was beginning to emerge, and it was simple. Hazel and Cordell were trying to gain access to my assets. They knew about my safe deposit box thanks to my carelessness, and now they were probably trying to forge documents to gain access to it. Before I could recover from this discovery, the phone rang. Hazel. Dad, are you home? Cordell and I thought we'd stop by for lunch. That was unheard of. 2 visits in a week? I'm busy, I answered dryly. Busy doing what? I could hear the irritation in her voice. You're 78 years old. What could you possibly have to do? Even at my age, there are things to do, Hazel, I tried to speak calmly. Maybe some other time. But we're on our way, she insisted. Literally 10 minutes from your house. I squeezed the receiver. Then I'm sorry, but you're going to have to turn around. I'm leaving in 5 minutes. Where? She sounded worried now. To my lawyer's, I lied. A lawyer? What for? Personal business, Hazel. I'll call you later. I hung up without waiting for an answer. Then I dressed quickly and actually left the house just in case they did come. I didn't want to see them, not now that my suspicions had turned into certainties. Instead of a lawyer, I headed to the local coffee shop. Sitting at the window with a cup of hot coffee, I watched the cars go by. Taking out a notebook, I started making a list of everything I'd learned. Cordell and Hazel's strange behavior, their sudden interest in my finances, the missing documents, the request for a duplicate key. I didn't notice someone approaching my table. Mr. Bayless? I looked up and saw Thomas, the young bank employee who had escorted me to the vault yesterday. May I sit down? He asked quietly. I nodded, surprised by his appearance. I'm not sure if I should tell you this, he began, looking around nervously, but I think you should know. Last night I saw Mr. Parker talking to a man in an expensive suit. They were discussing safety deposit boxes, and I definitely heard your name. Mr. Parker? I asked again. Bradley Parker. He works in customer service. And this man. He called himself your son-in-law. I felt the blood rush from my face. Are you sure? Thomas nodded. Absolutely. They were talking about some kind of plan, and Mr. Parker said something like, everything will be ready by Friday. Why are you telling me this? I asked, scrutinizing his face. Because what they're planning is illegal, he replied. And because my grandmother lost all her savings to the crooks. I don't want that to happen to anyone else. I thanked him and gave him $20, which he at first refused to take, but eventually accepted. Be careful, Mr. Bayless, he said in parting. I'd check all my papers if I were you. Mr. Parker specializes in powers of attorney and wills. When I got home, I found that Hazel and Cordell had come after all, as evidenced by the note left on the door. Dad, call me when you get back. It's important. I didn't call. Instead, I checked the footage from the cameras installed that morning. One of them clearly showed Hazel opening the front door with her key and Cordell following her. They spent about 20 minutes in the house, most of the time in my office. Before they left, Hazel left a note on the door and Cordell put something in his pocket. I couldn't see what it was. I immediately started checking all the paperwork. The bank statement folder was missing a few pages. The deed to the house was in place, but the last page with my signature was missing. I went cold as I realized the extent of their plan. That night, just as I was about to go to bed, the phone rang. I didn't answer it, letting the answering machine record the message. "Dad," Hazel's voice sounded concerned. "We stopped by today, but you weren't home. Please call me as soon as you can. It's very important. It's about your health. Dr. Shapiro called us. He's worried." I knew it was a lie. Dr. Shapiro would never call Hazel. He had too much respect for patient confidentiality. Besides, I'd only seen him a week ago, and he said I was in great shape for my age. I turned off the phone and sat in the chair by the window. The lights of Fall River, the city that had been my home all my life, twinkled behind the glass. Somewhere out there, in one of those houses, my daughter and her husband were planning to rob me, with my own blood. "What would you do, Ellie?" I whispered, looking at my wife's picture. Elaine always saw the best in people, even when they didn't deserve it. But she was also a strong woman who wouldn't let anyone sit on her neck. "Kindness doesn't mean weakness," she often said. I made a decision. Instead of openly confronting Hazel and Cordell, I decided to give them enough rope to hang themselves. I'll let their plan evolve, but I'll be one step ahead of them. In the morning, I'll call Mr. Foster and alert him to a possible fraud. Then I'll contact the police. And finally, I'll visit my real lawyer to change the will. Hazel will never get another dime of my fortune. I went to bed feeling strangely calm. For the first time in many days, I was confident in my actions. As painful as my daughter's betrayal had been, it had also freed me from illusions. I saw things clearly now. With these thoughts, I drifted into a dreamless sleep. Friday morning was cloudy. I awoke before dawn, tormented by anxious thoughts. The words of the young bank clerk were in my mind. "Everything will be ready by Friday." Today was Friday, the day Hazel and Cordell planned to put their plan into action. I ate breakfast earlier than usual, chewing my toast absent-mindedly, unable to taste it. The phone rang at 7:30 sharp. "Dad?" Hazel's voice sounded unusually cheerful for such an early hour. "Are you awake yet?" "Yes," I answered dryly. "What do you want at this hour?" "I just wanted to let you know that Cordell and I would be picking you up around 10. Dr. Shapiro scheduled a checkup for you, remember?" Another lie. Dr. Shapiro didn't give me any checkups. "I have other plans for today," I said. "And stop using my doctor as an excuse." "Dad," she sounded annoyed. "You're becoming unbearable. We're only trying to help." "Not today, Hazel. I have business at the bank." Pause. "The bank?" Her voice trembled. "But it's Friday. You usually go to the bank on Mondays." "I decided to change my habits," I replied. "At my age, it's good for brain activity." "Why don't we give you a ride?" she suggested too hastily. "Then we can stop by the doctor's office." "No, thank you. I'd rather walk." After the call, I called the police and reported my suspicions. Sergeant Moriarty, an elderly officer I knew from the days when he patrolled our neighborhood, listened to me carefully. "Mr. Bayless, if you're sure there's a crime in progress, we can send a plainclothes officer to the bank." "I'd be very grateful, Sergeant. The bank opens at 9, but I plan to be there by 8:30. I know the back door that the employees use." Then I called Mr. Foster, the bank manager, told him about my suspicions and my conversation with Thomas. "These are serious allegations, Mr. Bayless." Foster's voice sounded concerned. "Mr. Parker has been with us for 5 years and has an impeccable reputation. Nevertheless, I'm convinced he's involved in an attempted fraud on my accounts," I insisted. "And I'd like you to check the security footage from the last few days." Foster agreed to meet me at 8:30 at the service entrance. I dressed more carefully than usual. My best tweed jacket that Elaine had given me for our last anniversary, ironed pants, polished shoes. If I was to face my own daughter's betrayal today, I wanted to look dignified. Before leaving, I glanced at Elaine's picture. "I'm sorry, Ellie," I whispered. "I couldn't keep her out of this." The bank was a 15-minute walk from my house, but today I decided to take a cab. The driver, a young guy with an earpiece in his ear, looked at me strangely when I asked him to drop me off at the bank service entrance. "Are you sure, sir? The main entrance is on the other side." "I know," I replied. "I have a meeting with the manager." Mr. Foster was already waiting for me, glancing nervously at his watch. Standing beside him was a stout man in civilian clothes who identified himself as Detective Rodriguez. "Mr. Bayless." Foster shook my hand. "I checked the security tapes like you asked. I found something disturbing." We went into his office where he showed me the videos from the last 3 days. One of them clearly showed Bradley Parker talking to Cordell in a cafe across the street from the bank. Another showed Parker escorting Hazel into the vault area after the bank closed, in direct violation of protocol. "This is very serious," Foster said, turning off the monitor. "If Mr. Parker is really planning to illegally access your safety deposit box, we need to catch him red-handed." Detective Rodriguez nodded. "We have grounds to detain them, but it would be better to catch them in the act of committing a crime." "Mr. Bayless, are you willing to cooperate?" "More than willing," I replied. "What's the plan?" The plan was simple. I would wait in the office next door to the vault while Foster and Rodriguez watched through the video surveillance system. As soon as Parker, Hazel, and Cordell tried to access my box, we'd intervene. "And if they don't show up today?" I asked. "Then we'll continue surveillance," Rodriguez replied. "But from what we've seen on the tapes, and from your young bank clerk, today is day X." The bank opened at 9 and the usual customers began to arrive. I sat in a small office looking through some brochures, pretending to be busy exploring investment opportunities. Foster looked in on me periodically, letting me know that all was quiet for now. At 10:15, the door to my office opened and Detective Rodriguez walked in. "They're here," he said quietly. "Your daughter, her husband, and Mr. Parker." They had just entered the vault. My heart hammered harder. It was one thing to suspect treachery and quite another to face it. "I want to see," I said, rising. Rodriguez hesitated. "This may be emotionally difficult for you, Mr. Bayless." "I must see with my own eyes," I insisted. "Otherwise there will always be room for doubt." He nodded and led me down the corridor to the vault. The doors to the main room were closed, but there was a small customer room with a door ajar next to it. We approached it cautiously. Through the crack I could see part of the vault and the desk where Hazel, Cordell, and Bradley Parker were sitting. In front of them was my safe deposit box. I recognized it by the number engraved on the lid. "Here's the paperwork," Parker said, handing Cordell some papers. "The power of attorney looks authentic. The signature is notarized. Technically, we're acting within the law." "Of course we are," Cordell replied with a smug grin. "Aubrey signed that power of attorney himself. I knew it was a lie. I never signed any power of attorney." "And if he comes to check the safe deposit box?" Parker asked nervously. "He does it regularly." "Not today," Hazel grinned. "I took care of it. He thinks we'll pick him up at 10. By the time he realizes we're not coming, it'll be too late." Parker opened the safe deposit box and began laying the contents out on the table. Bonds, real estate deeds, envelopes of cash. "How much is in here?" Cordell asked greedily, grabbing one of the envelopes. "I estimate about $200,000 in bonds and $50,000 in cash," Parker replied. "Plus real estate deeds you can use to re-register the property." "Great," Cordell rubbed his hands together. "My friend at the notary's office will do the paperwork retroactively. We'll have the house by the end of the day." "And what about the old man himself?" Parker asked. "We have already prepared the documents for the nursing home," answered Hazel coldly. "With his signature on the power of attorney, we can put him there forcibly. Dr. Mitchell, Cordell's colleague, is ready to confirm his incapacity." I felt my insides turn upside down. My own daughter was planning to put me in a nursing home against my will, to steal my home, my savings, everything Elaine and I had built up through decades of hard work. "That's enough," I whispered to the detective. "I've seen and heard everything." Rodriguez nodded and signaled over his radio. A moment later, the vault doors swung open and 2 uniformed police officers walked in, followed by Mr. Foster. "Bradley Parker," Foster began in an official tone, "you are violating bank protocol and the law by providing unauthorized access to a customer's safe deposit box." Parker turned pale, dropping the stack of documents he was holding. "Mr. Foster, I can explain. They have a power of attorney." "A forged power of attorney," Detective Rodriguez intervened, entering the vault. "Hazel Woodworth, Cordell Woodworth, Bradley Parker, you are being held on suspicion of attempted fraud, forgery of documents, and conspiracy to steal." Hazel froze, her face contorted with shock. Cordell tried to hide the envelope with the money in his pocket, but one of the officers immediately stopped him. "What's going on?" Hazel whispered. "There's been some kind of mistake." At that moment, I came out from behind the door and stood in front of them. Hazel turned even paler when she saw me. "Daddy, what are you doing here?" "Watching my only daughter try to rob me and put me in a nursing home," I answered calmly, though I was seething inside. "It's not what you think," Cordell began, trying to smile. "We just wanted to help manage your finances." "Shut up, Cordell," I cut him off. "I've heard it all. The power of attorney, the nursing home, the incapacity thing, everything." Hazel burst into tears, but her tears gave me no sympathy. Too many years of pretending, too many lies. "How could you, Daddy?" she sobbed. "Sick the police on us? We're a family." "A family doesn't steal from each other," I replied. "Families don't lock their old people in nursing homes to take their property." The officers handcuffed all 3 of them. Parker remained silent with his head down. Cordell tried to explain something, mentioning his debts and financial difficulties as if that could be an excuse. Hazel continued to cry, casting accusing glances at me as if I were to blame for what had happened. "Mr. Bayless," Detective Rodriguez addressed me, "we're going to need an official statement from you. Are you ready to make one?" "Right now," I answered firmly. As they were being led out of the vault, Hazel stopped next to me. "You're going to regret this, Daddy," she whispered through gritted teeth, changing her tears to anger. "You'll die alone, and no one will come to your funeral." I looked her straight in the eyes that had once looked so much like Elaine's, but now there was nothing of my late wife in them. "I'm alone now, Hazel. I've been alone for years, ever since you decided my money was more important than our relationship." She was led away, and I was left standing in the middle of the vault, surrounded by scattered documents, shards of the life Elaine and I had built over decades. Mr. Foster came over to me and put a hand on my shoulder. "I'm very sorry, Mr. Bayless. The bank will, of course, pay for any damages and conduct an internal investigation. Mr. Parker will be fired immediately." "Thank you," I responded machine-like, still not fully comprehending what had happened. Detective Rodriguez took me to his office to make a statement. I mechanically answered questions, signed papers, and provided evidence. My mind was as if in a fog, shielding itself from the emotional pain of betrayal. "Mr. Bayless," Rodriguez said softly when we were done, "I understand how difficult this is for you. I've seen a lot of family betrayals in my years of service, but it never gets easier, especially when it comes to your own children." "You know what the weird thing is, Detective?" I looked at him with tired eyes. "I'm not even surprised. Somewhere deep down inside, I always knew Hazel only saw me as a wallet. I just didn't want to believe it." Rodriguez nodded. "Do you need somewhere to stay for a few days? Sometimes, in cases like this, we recommend a temporary change of scenery." "No," I shook my head. "I'm going back home. This is my home, and I won't let them take it away from me even for a day." As I left the police station, I felt strangely relieved. It was as if the heavy weight I had been carrying for years had finally been lifted off my shoulders. No more pretending that Hazel and I had a normal relationship. No more looking for excuses for her coldness and greed. The truth, as bitter as it was liberating. I walked home slowly, enjoying the simple fact of my existence for the first time in a long time. The air seemed fresher, the colors brighter. At the corner of my street, I stopped at a small flower shop and bought a bouquet of white roses, Elaine's favorite flowers. At home, I put the roses in a vase next to her picture. "You were right about a lot of things, Ellie," I said, looking at her smiling face. "But not about Hazel. She didn't turn out to be a good person like you'd hoped." The phone rang several times that night. I didn't answer it. Turning on the answering machine, I listened to messages from Hazel's lawyer, from her mother-in-law, even from a neighbor who reported that poor Hazel had called her hysterically. None of them asked how I was feeling after betraying my daughter. No one really cared. The last message was from Hazel herself, recorded probably from the police station. "Daddy," her voice sounded hoarse from crying, "please take a statement. They're saying we're looking at real jail time. You don't want your only daughter to end up in jail, do you? Think about what people would say, what Mom would think." I turned off the answering machine before I finished. Elaine would never approve of what Hazel did. Never. I sat in the chair by the window, watching the dusk descend on the city. A strange calmness swept over me. I knew there would be difficult days ahead. The trial, the depositions, maybe even publicity in the local media. But I was willing to go through with it, for myself, for Elaine's memory, for justice. My phone rang again. This time I decided to answer it. It was Detective Rodriguez. "Mr. Bayless, just wanted to let you know that all three are being held pending trial. The judge denied bail, given the seriousness of the charges and the risk of attempted fraud again." "Thank you, Detective," I replied. "I appreciate your work." "You're welcome, sir. Hang in there. It won't be easy, but you made the right choice." I hung up the phone, and for the first time that day I felt tears welling up in my eyes. Not because of Hazel. I had long ago mourned the loss of the daughter I thought I knew. I cried for Elaine, who never got to know what our daughter had really become. Maybe it was for the best. Wiping my eyes, I went upstairs to the bedroom. Today had been a long day, and tomorrow was going to be just as hard. But for the first time in years, I felt in control of my life. Whatever happened next would be my choice, my decision. I went to bed and, as always, said goodnight to Elaine. And then, for the first time in a long time, I fell asleep quickly and peacefully. The weekend after the incident at the bank passed in a strange daze. I hardly left the house, avoiding the prying eyes of my neighbors. News travels fast in a small town, especially news as scandalous as this: a daughter and son-in-law trying to rip off their own father with the help of a corrupt bank teller. On Monday morning, the doorbell rang. On the threshold stood Mr. Foster, the bank manager, with a leather briefcase in his hands and a nervous expression on his face. "Mr. Bayless," he held out his hand to me. "May I come in? We need to talk." I led him into the living room, offered him coffee, which he politely declined. I sat across from him, watching him awkwardly open his briefcase and pull out a folder of documents. "First of all, I want to formally apologize on behalf of Fall River Community Bank for the incident that occurred last Friday," he began in a formal tone. "The behavior of our employee, Mr. Parker, is completely unacceptable and goes against all the principles of our institution." I nodded without saying a word. Foster continued, "Mr. Parker was fired immediately, and we conducted an internal investigation to make sure that similar incidents don't happen again in the future." He placed a document in front of me. "We would like to offer you compensation in the amount of $50,000 for moral damages and inconvenience caused by this incident." I glanced at the document but didn't take it. "What about the criminal prosecution of Mr. Parker?" Foster squirmed uncomfortably in his chair. "We would prefer to settle that matter, without too much publicity. $50,000 is a substantial sum, Mr. Bayless, and a guarantee that your funds are perfectly safe. You're trying to cover it up. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. A scandal like this could seriously damage the bank's reputation, Foster said quietly, almost pleadingly. We've been serving this community for 70 years. Think of the people who could lose confidence in us, the depositors who would take their money. What about depositors whose funds might be stolen by corrupt employees? I asked sharply. You do realize that Parker may have done this before, right? And maybe he's not the only one? Foster turned pale. We've conducted a thorough review of all of Mr. Parker's transactions over the past 2 years. No other irregularities were found. That you were able to notice, I finished for him. Mr. Foster, I've been a financial auditor for 35 years. I know how easy it is to hide financial fraud when you know the system inside out. I stood up, signaling that this conversation was over. I won't accept your compensation, and I won't agree to keep the matter quiet. Mr. Parker should be held criminally liable just like my daughter and son-in-law, and I intend to sue the bank for negligence in securing client assets. Foster's face contorted with alarm. Mr. Bayless, please reconsider. A lawsuit could take years. At your age, at my age, I interrupted him, I have the time and determination to see this through. Now please leave. My lawyer will be in touch. After Foster left, I immediately called Maurice Lewinsky, my longtime friend and attorney. We had met in college and, although we had chosen different career paths, had kept in touch over the years. Maurice was one of the few who attended Elaine's funeral and called me regularly after her death. Aubrey, what the hell is going on? He asked, barely picking up the phone. I got a call from Hazel saying you've lost your mind and filed a police report on her. You talked to Hazel? I was surprised. She was hysterical, said you misunderstood the situation, that they just wanted to help you manage your finances and you called the police. Maurice, I took a deep breath. My daughter and her husband tried to steal my money and house, forged a power of attorney and planned to put me in a nursing home. That's not helping me manage my finances. Pause. Damn, he finally exhaled. Are you sure? I saw and heard everything with my own eyes and ears, Maurice. They didn't know I was in the bank. I heard them discussing how to get rid of me and my property. Oh my God, Maurice's voice trembled. Aubrey, I'm so sorry. I know how much you loved Hazel. I did, I agreed. It's past tense. Now I need your help as a lawyer. I want to change the will to exclude Hazel completely from the estate, and I want to sue the bank for negligence. Against the bank? Maurice was surprised. Why? Their employee was an accomplice, Maurice. He accessed my safety deposit box without my knowledge. The bank is trying to keep the matter quiet by offering me compensation in exchange for my silence. But I want them to conduct a full investigation and review their security protocols. Otherwise, other elderly customers could get hurt. I understand. Maurice's voice became professional and collected. I can stop by your place this afternoon with the necessary paperwork to change the will. As for the lawsuit against the bank, we'll have to think it over carefully. It could be a lengthy process. I have plenty of time, I replied, and enough money for a good lawyer. Maurice arrived at 3 o'clock in the afternoon with a folder of documents and a bottle of good scotch. We sat around until evening discussing the details of the new will and the strategy for the lawsuit against the bank. Under the new will, most of my estate was to go to a charity for the elderly and a small amount to a local college to establish the Elaine Bayless Memorial Scholarship for finance students. Are you sure you want to exclude Hazel completely? Maurice asked when we were done. Not to leave her even a token amount? I'm sure, I answered. She's already tried to steal everything. I won't give her a dime. After signing the new will and all the necessary paperwork to file a lawsuit, Maurice and I opened our scotch and drank silently to Elaine, to what she would never know. The next morning, the phone rang. It was Martha King, Elaine's old friend and my neighbor for the past 30 years. Aubrey, honey, how are you? Her voice sounded concerned. I heard the terrible news. I'm fine, Martha, I replied, though it wasn't quite true. Poor Hazel came to see me last night, she continued. She looked just awful. Said it was all a misunderstanding, that you and she had had a quarrel, and you'd called the police. It wasn't a fight, Martha, I tried to say calmly. Hazel and Cordell tried to steal my money and my house. The police have all the evidence. Oh my God, she exhaled. But Aubrey, she's your daughter. Do you really want her to go to jail? I want justice, Martha. Hazel is a grown woman who made her choice. Now she has to face the consequences. But what would Elaine think? It was a low blow, and Martha knew it. Elaine would be heartbroken, I agreed. But she also believed in truth and justice. I would not betray those principles, even for the sake of her memory. The conversation with Martha was followed by calls from other mutual acquaintances, people I barely remembered, but who suddenly felt the need to intervene. They all said the same thing. Think about Hazel. She's your daughter. What will people say? None of them asked how I felt after betraying my only child. By evening, I turned off the phone, tired of unsolicited advice and manipulation. Sitting in my office, I pored over old photos, Hazel as a baby, at the prom, at the wedding, the happy family we never really had. Or had we, but briefly. I couldn't pinpoint the exact moment when it all went wrong. Maybe when Hazel met Cordell? Or earlier, when she'd gone away to college and come back a different person? Or maybe there was always something Elaine and I had overlooked, blindly loving our only child. There was a knock on the door. I didn't answer, hoping the intruder would leave. But the knock came again, more insistent. Sighing, I got up and went to open the door. At the door stood Cordell's mother, Vivian Woodworth, a tall, thin woman with the same unpleasant expression on her son's face. "Mr. Bayless," she began without greeting, "we must talk." "We have nothing to talk about, Mrs. Woodworth." I tried to close the door, but she put her foot in the opening. "My son and your daughter could go to prison because of your stubbornness." Her voice was as cold as ice. "Is that what you really want?" "Your son and my daughter could go to jail because of their own actions," I corrected her. "They tried to steal my money and property. That's a crime." "They just wanted to secure their future." She took a step forward, forcing me to step back. "After all, that money would have gone to Hazel after you died anyway. They were just speeding up the process." Her words, spoken with such equanimity, shocked me even more than Hazel and Cordell's act itself. This woman really believed that her son had the right to steal my money simply because it might someday be inherited by his wife. "Get out of my house," I said, feeling the anger rising inside. "Now, or I'll call the police." Vivian grinned. "Do you really want another scandal, Mr. Bayless? The whole town is already talking about you, the old man who sent his own daughter to jail. What do you think people would say if you called the police on me too?" "I don't care what people say," I said firmly. "I know the truth. Now go away." She took another step forward, her face contorted with anger. "You'll regret this, Aubrey Bayless. I'll do everything I can to help Hazel and Cordell get away with it, and when they do, they'll take everything you have. Every last dime." I didn't answer, just grabbed my phone and started dialing. Vivian snorted and headed for the door. "This isn't over." She tossed over her shoulder and walked out. I closed the door and leaned against it, feeling my legs shaking. Never before had I encountered such blatant anger and greed. This woman had raised Cordell to believe that he had the right to take what was his, and he must have passed that philosophy on to Hazel. I got a call this evening from Detective Rodriguez. "Mr. Bayless, just wanted to give you a heads up. We've received information that the Woodworth family are hiring a prominent criminal defense attorney, James Morgan. He's known for his, aggressive defense tactics." "What does that mean for the case?" I asked. "They may try to discredit you," Rodriguez explained. "Question your competence, claim that you gave them permission to access the safety deposit box and then forgot about it. Morgan is known for turning cases upside down, turning victims into defendants. They have no proof, I countered. We have witnesses, videotapes, forged documents by Yes, the evidence is on our side, Rodriguez agreed. But they can drag out the case, make the process exhausting for you. Are you ready for that? I'm ready, I answered without hesitation. I will not back down. After talking to Rodriguez, I couldn't sleep for a long time. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling and thinking about how strangely life had turned. Until a week ago, I was just a lonely old man whose daughter visited occasionally out of a sense of duty. Now I was a man who had sent his daughter to prison and was preparing for a court battle against his own family and an entire bank. What would you do in my shoes, Ellie? I whispered into the darkness, knowing there would be no answer. But in a strange way, I felt that Elaine would have approved of my actions. She always believed in justice, even when it hurt. The next morning, I woke up with renewed determination. After having breakfast, I called Maurice and asked him to expedite the process of filing a lawsuit against the bank. I want it done as soon as possible, I said, while I still have the strength to fight. Aubrey, are you sure? Maurice's voice sounded concerned. It's going to be a difficult process, emotionally exhausting. I'm sure, I answered firmly. I won't let them win. Not Hazel and Cordell, not the bank that's trying to keep the case quiet. All right, Maurice agreed after a pause. I'll file suit today. And Aubrey, I'm proud of you. Not everyone would have had the strength to fight in a situation like this. His words touched me more than I expected. In a world where everyone seemed to be against me, it was important to know that at least one person was on my side. After talking to Maurice, I went out for a walk, for the first time since the incident at the bank. The day was clear, sunny, with a light fall breeze. I walked down familiar streets, past the homes of people I'd known for decades. Some neighbors averted their eyes when they saw me. Others nodded sympathetically or stopped to express support. Mr. Bayless, Mrs. Rodriguez, an elderly widow who lived across the street, called out to me. I heard what happened. Don't listen to anyone who says what you did was wrong. My son-in-law tried to do the same thing to me 5 years ago. I didn't find the strength to fight back then, and now I live in a tiny apartment and they live in my house. I thanked her for her support, suddenly realizing that I was not alone in my situation. How many other elderly people face betrayal from those who are supposed to care for them? When I returned home, I found an envelope in the mailbox with no return address. Inside was a note written in Hazel's familiar handwriting. Dad, you've always been stubborn and cruel. All my life you have controlled my every move, my every decision. You've never understood what I want, what I need. You think Cordell and I are criminals? We just wanted what was rightfully ours. You saved up all that money, but you never shared it with us, even when we were desperate. If you don't drop the charges, I'll tell everyone what you really were. A cold, calculating tyrant who only cared about money, never about his family. Last chance, Dad. Drop the charges or you'll regret it. Hazel. I reread the note twice, marveling at how distorted Hazel's perception of the past was. I'd never been a tyrant. Yes, I was strict, especially about finances, but only because I wanted to teach her the value of hard-earned money. I never denied her the necessities. I paid for her education, her wedding, helped with the down payment on the house. Hazel's note wasn't just an attempt at manipulation. It was a threat. She threatened to blacken my name, to distort the truth about our family life. But somehow, that threat didn't scare me. I knew the truth. Elaine knew the truth. And some of our old friends knew it too. I put the note in an envelope and took it to Maurice as further evidence against Hazel. Attempting to pressure a witness was another crime in a long list. When I got home, the phone rang again. This time it was Foster from the bank, with a new offer. $100,000 in compensation and a public apology, but no criminal prosecution of Parker. My mind hasn't changed, Mr. Foster, I replied. I'm filing a lawsuit against the bank. My lawyer is already on it." "You're making a mistake, Mr. Bayless." Foster's voice sounded threatening. "The bank has considerable legal resources. This process could take years." "Then it's best not to waste any time," I replied, and hung up. That evening, I got a call from Detective Rodriguez with news that the judge had scheduled a preliminary hearing for Hazel, Cordell, and Parker for the following week. "I'll have to testify." "Are you ready for that, Mr. Bayless?" Rodriguez asked. "It can be emotionally taxing to speak against your own daughter in court." "I am ready," I replied. "I will speak the truth, no matter how painful it may be." As I hung up the phone, I felt strangely calm. There was a hard fight ahead, against the bank, against Hazel and Cordell, against everyone who was trying to get me to back down. But I was ready. For the first time in a long time, I felt I was fighting for something important, not just my money or my possessions, but for principles, for justice, for truth. "We'll get through this, Ellie," I said, looking at the picture of my wife. "We always have." And for the first time since her death, I felt like she could really hear me. The Bristol County courtroom was packed on the day of the first hearing in the case. It seemed like all of Fall River had come to see the family drama that was now in the public eye. I sat in the front row next to Maurice, outwardly calm, though inwardly I shrank at the thought of what was coming. When Hazel, Cordell, and Parker were brought in, I forced myself to look at them. Hazel looked gaunt, with dark circles under her eyes. Cordell maintained a smug look, though his usually perfectly styled hair was a mess. Parker seemed completely broken, hunched over with a wan look in his eyes. "Is everything all right?" Maurice asked quietly, noticing how tense I was. "Yeah," I answered. "It's just weird to see them like this." Judge Hampton, an older woman with a shrewd eye, began the hearing. The prosecutor outlined the charges: fraud, forgery, conspiracy to embezzle, and breach of bank secrecy. The defense attorney, the famous James Morgan, a tall man with silver temples and a shark smile, immediately filed a motion to dismiss. "Your Honor, this is a family misunderstanding that has no place in court," he said confidently. Mr. Bayless, an elderly man with possible cognitive impairment, misinterpreted the actions of his caring daughter and son-in-law. I felt anger rising inside me, but Maurice put a hand on my shoulder warningly. "Calm down," he whispered. "That's what they want you to do, to lose your temper." Judge Hampton heard the defense and denied the motion. "We have enough evidence to proceed," she said, "including videotapes and testimony that directly contradicts the defense's case." The next 4 hours were grueling. The prosecutor presented evidence, called witnesses Thomas, the young bank clerk, Detective Rodriguez, Mr. Foster, who clearly felt uncomfortable having to testify against his former employee. When it was my turn to testify, I stepped up to the witness stand, feeling the stares of everyone present. Hazel looked at me pleadingly, Cordell with barely concealed anger. "Mr. Bayless," the prosecutor began, "please tell the court in your own words what happened on October 23rd at the Fall River Community Bank." I took a deep breath and began the story, calmly, methodically, without omitting details. How I suspected something was wrong, how I overheard Hazel's phone call, how I discovered the missing documents, how I received a notice requesting a duplicate key to the safe deposit box. "And what did you see at the bank on October 23rd? The prosecutor asked. "I saw my daughter, her husband, and Mr. Parker leaning over the contents of my safe deposit box. Cordell was holding wads of bonds and cash. They were discussing how they forged a power of attorney with my signature on it and how they planned to deed my house to themselves. Hazel mentioned that they had prepared paperwork to put me in a nursing home involuntarily, with a fake medical report that I was incapacitated." There was silence in the courtroom. I didn't look at Hazel, couldn't bring myself to see the look on her face. As the defense began its cross-examination, James Morgan went on the offensive. "Mr. Bayless," his voice was deceptively soft, Do you claim that you never gave your daughter power of attorney to manage your finances? Never, I answered firmly, and never discussed with her the possibility of moving into a nursing home if your health deteriorated. Never in that context. Hazel had suggested several times that I move in with them or into a nursing home, but I'd always refused. Morgan's changed tactics. Mr. Bayless, tell me, have you always been, a frugal person? I've been responsible with finances, I corrected him. Frugality and responsibility are different things. And you never denied your daughter financial help when she really needed it? I paid for her education, her wedding, helped with the down payment on the house. I've always helped when I saw a real need. And who determined what was a real need? Morgan asked with a smile. Did you? Objection, the prosecutor interjected. The question is irrelevant. Sustained, agreed the judge. Mr. Morgan, stick to the facts of this case. The questioning continued for another hour. Morgan tried to paint me as a tyrant, a miser, a man who didn't understand the needs of a young family. But the facts were on my side, and all his attempts to discredit me fell apart over a simple truth. Hazel and Cordell had tried to steal my money and property using false documents. When the first hearing was over, Judge Hampton ruled that the case would go to trial. Hazel, Cordell, and Parker were formally charged and released on bail pending trial. As I left the courthouse, I ran into reporters. Camera flashes, microphones, shouted questions. Maurice pushed them away, helping me to a waiting cab. Don't answer them, he advised. Let the court speak. But not everyone got that advice. The next day, the local paper published an interview with Hazel, where she portrayed herself as the victim of a cold, heartless father who preferred money to his own daughter. He always loved money more than he loved me, the paper quoted Hazel as saying. Even when Mom was alive, he controlled every dime. My husband and I just wanted to secure our future, knowing that Dad could change the will at any time out of whim. I folded the paper without finishing it. How easily history is rewritten to justify one's own actions. Parallel to the criminal case, my civil suit against the bank was developing. Fall River Community Bank at first denied any responsibility, claiming that Parker's actions were his personal initiative, not authorized by management. But when Maurice presented evidence of systematic violations of security protocols and lack of proper oversight, their position began to weaken. The breakthrough came when my case drew the attention of other elderly bank customers. Two of them came forward with similar stories, not as dramatic as mine, but indicative of the same disregard for security on the part of the bank. One man discovered unexplained withdrawals from his account. Another noticed that his investment portfolio had been altered without his knowledge. Maurice consolidated these cases into a class action lawsuit, and the bank became seriously concerned. The negative publicity had already led to an exodus of depositors. The bank's board of directors initiated pre-trial settlement talks. Meanwhile, the criminal case against Hazel, Cordell, and Parker was moving toward trial. The prosecutor offered a deal, a guilty plea in exchange for a lighter sentence. Parker immediately agreed, willing to testify against my daughter and son-in-law. Cordell hesitated but eventually accepted the deal, realizing that the evidence against him was overwhelming. Only Hazel persisted, refusing to admit her guilt. She believes that you will not stand for it and withdraw the charges, Maurice told me after the next meeting, or that the judge and jury will believe her version of the caring daughter trying to protect her feeble-minded father from himself. She's wrong, I replied calmly. The trial was scheduled for mid-January, 3 months after the incident at the bank. In the meantime, I had received several more letters from Hazel, all with the same content, a mixture of accusations, manipulations, and poorly concealed threats. I passed them on to the prosecutor without responding. In December, Fall River Community Bank proposed a final settlement to our class action lawsuit, compensation for all affected customers, a complete change in security protocols, the firing of several executives, including Mr. Foster, and a public apology. My share of the compensation was $450,000, significantly more than their original offer of $50,000. Except? Maurice asked, showing me the terms of the agreement. Yes, I decided after some thought. The money wouldn't bring my daughter back to me, but it might do some good for others. Hazel's criminal trial began in mid-January as planned. Parker and Cordell appeared as prosecution witnesses, corroborating all the facts of the fraud. Hazel looked absolutely shattered as her own husband testified against her, describing how they had been planning the scam for months. It was her idea, Cordell stated, avoiding his wife's gaze. She said her father was becoming forgetful and we should take control of his finances before he squandered his entire fortune. Hazel's face contorted with anger and betrayal. Now she knew how I felt when I discovered them in the bank above my safe deposit box. The jury deliberated for only 2 hours before reaching a verdict, guilty on all counts. Judge Hampton sentenced Hazel to 3 years probation, community service, and a $200,000 fine. Cordell, thanks to a plea bargain, received 2 years probation and a $150,000 fine. Parker got a year of probation and a smaller fine, but a lifetime ban from working in the financial sector. As the judge read the verdict, I looked at Hazel, trying to find a shadow of remorse in her face. But all I saw was anger and resentment at me, at Cordell, at the world, but not at herself. After the trial, Detective Rodriguez came up to me. "Justice has been done, Mr. Bayless," he said, shaking my hand. "Though I realize you're not happy about it." "No," I agreed. "But it was necessary. Not only for me, but for other elderly people who might fall victim to such schemes." "You're a very brave man," Rodriguez said. "Not many people would have found the strength to go through this." I thanked him and headed out of the courthouse where Maurice was waiting for me. We were going to celebrate the end of this difficult period with dinner at a small Italian restaurant that Elaine loved. But there was another person waiting for me at the exit, Hazel. She stood alone, no lawyer, no Cordell. Her eyes were red from crying, her makeup smeared. "Daddy," she began in a shaky voice, "can we talk? Please." I stopped, looking at her, at my only daughter, the one I had once loved more than anything in the world. "About what, Hazel?" I asked calmly. "I made a terrible mistake." She took a step toward me. "I was under Cordell's influence. He convinced me that we were entitled to that money, that you'd never understand our needs. Cordell said in court that it was your idea," I reminded her. "He's lying," she exclaimed. "He's always lying, manipulative. Dad, I'm filing for divorce. I can't be with a man who betrayed me like that." "How did you betray me?" She flinched at my words. "This is different," she mumbled. "I'm your daughter. We're family. A family has to stick together, especially now that I'm alone. With a huge fine I can't pay?" I finished for her. Hazel lowered her eyes. "Yes, and with that too. The house is mortgaged. The accounts are almost empty. Cordell's blown it all on gambling and bad investments. I don't know what to do, Dad. You're my only chance." "At what, Hazel? Another attempt to get my money?" I shook my head. "I've changed my will. You will no longer receive a dime of my estate. It's going to charity and a scholarship in your mother's name." Her face contorted with anger, showing the true nature of her remorse. "You can't do this. I am your daughter, your blood." "Blood does not give you the right to steal, lie, and betray," I replied calmly. "Goodbye, Hazel." I turned and walked toward the waiting Maurice, ignoring Hazel's screams behind me. She was shouting accusations, threats, curses, all the things she'd probably always thought but had been hiding until now. "Are you okay?" Maurice asked as we got into his car. "Yes," I answered, wondering if I really was. "I'm fine." A month after the trial, I got a letter from Cordell. He said that he and Hazel were getting a divorce, that he was truly remorseful for his actions, and that he would like my forgiveness someday. I did not reply. Some bridges were burned forever. Compensation from the bank arrived in my account in February. I decided to put most of the money to good use. After consulting with Maurice and several financial advisors, I established the Safe Aging Foundation, which aims to provide educational programs on financial security for seniors. The first workshop was held in March at the Fall River Community Center. I expected 5 or 6 people to attend, but the room was full, over 50 seniors, many with stories similar to mine. My son tried to get me to sign a power of attorney saying it was just regular insurance, said one woman. My nephew helped me with banking transactions and systematically stole from my account, shared another pensioner. I realized that I had found my new vocation. Together with a team of lawyers, financial advisors, and social workers, we developed a comprehensive program to help seniors protect their assets, recognize the signs of financial fraud, and know their rights. By the end of the year, our program had received a grant from the state of Massachusetts and expanded to several neighboring towns. I appeared on local television, gave newspaper interviews, and conducted one-on-one counseling sessions. One spring day, exactly 6 months after the incident at the bank, I walked by the house that had once belonged to Hazel and Cordell. It had a "for sale" sign hanging on it. A neighbor told me that Hazel had moved to another state to start a new life. Cordell stayed in Fall River, taking a low-paying job at an insurance company, the only place that would take him with a criminal record. I felt no schadenfreude or pity, only a quiet sadness for what might have been if greed hadn't destroyed our family. That evening I sat in my office preparing for tomorrow's seminar. On the desk was a picture of Elaine, the same one from Cape Cod, with her hair fluttering in the wind and a radiant smile. "I found my way, Ellie," I told her. "Not the way we planned, but maybe even better. Now I'm helping people, doing something really important." And in the silence of the house, I thought I heard her quiet, approving laugh, the same one that always warmed my heart on the coldest days. I closed the folder with the materials for tomorrow's seminar and turned off the desk lamp. Tomorrow would be a new day, new people, new stories. Life went on, and for the first time in a long time, I was glad for it. As I walked up to my bedroom, I thought about the strange irony of fate. The betrayal of my daughter, the most painful experience of my life, had led me to a new calling, a new community, a new meaning of existence. Sometimes out of the darkest moments, unexpected light is born. I went to bed on my half, leaving Elaine's half untouched out of habit. "Good night, Ellie," I whispered, as I had done every night for the past 3 years. And this time I thought the silence answered with a light, almost elusive, "Good night, Aubrey." I smiled and closed my eyes, ready for a new day and all it would bring.